Hello. Okay, today I'll do something different and um, I'll set up my Python working environment because I have to um, apply the things I learned to my data sets. So to do that, I'm going to watch two videos. One is from Ken Jee and the other one is this one here.
Set up your data science environment. In data science, even if you're using Python or using R, most people use Anaconda, a data science specific platform. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you how to download this, how to set it up, and how to configure it so that you can use it going forward. And this really just makes your life as simple as possible when you're learning this field. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. And if you want to see more content at the intersection of data science and sports analytics, please consider subscribing to my channel. I actually was having some problems with one of the packages on here, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to just delete it from my computer and start fresh. So this is some of the impetus for this video. The other reason I'm making this is I've used Anaconda and a lot of these packages in some of my other videos, and I wanted to show you how to install it from scratch in case you didn't know how. Okay, so let's get started. We go to anaconda.com. Let's just go to the regular one here. This is all linked in the description below, and you can just go and click this big download button over here. Now, depending on which system you're using,
Okay, so now I am downloading the individual edition on my work computer. 64-bit graphical installer on Windows 10. Okay. And done.
Windows, Mac, or Linux. I'm on Windows, and I'm going to download the Python 3.7 version. If you download Python 3.7, you can still use Python 2.7. You just have to create a different instance of Anaconda, and I will show you how to do that in a little bit. So we can download this here. You see, it's a pretty big file, and it takes some time to download. Okay, so my instance has finally finished downloading, and I can click and open this up here. So we go through this page, we click next, we agree to the license agreement, and I generally do it just for me. You can do it for all users, but sometimes when you're updating it or doing things like that, you have to log in to as the admin, which can kind of be a pain. So I recommend just doing it for yourself. Then you store it in users, whatever your computer is, Anaconda 3. You can store it some other places, but I think this is generally a good spot to put it. Now, they generally don't recommend that you put the path environment in. You do this after the fact, and I think that that's probably a good idea. So generally don't recommend that you put the path environment in. You do this after the fact, and I think that that's probably a good idea. So I'm going to go ahead with those, and now we will have this basically download on our computer here. Okay, so this usually takes 5 or so minutes. So this process generally takes some time. I kind of cut a little footage to speed things up for you here. So we continue, and then we eventually finish here. learn more about Anaconda Cloud or get started with Anaconda here, but I think it's generally fun to do. So if you select those things, it'll bring you to some of these login areas where you can create an account if you want. I won't really worry about that right now, but what we will do is we'll log into the Anaconda Navigator right here. And so we can see basically what we just downloaded. And I'll walk you through each of these packages to kind of talk you through how you can use them as a data scientist and how they could improve the quality of your work to a certain extent.
I'm reading something on Twitter about the sports club called Brentford FC in England, and this tweet series is from Joe Pompliano. So apparently this is another Moneyball type of situation. So Ken, maybe you know about this. This guy, um, Matthew Benham, studied physics in Oxford and then joined the Bank of America, became a VP, stayed there for 12 years, and then he just quit. And then went to sports bet business, sports gambling business, used data driven decision making and stuff there. And then he made some fortune, and then he bought the sports club, which he was a fan of since his childhood, Brentford FC. So he initially gave a loan, and then the club couldn't pay, and then he bought the club, but then he did some weird stuff, like he completely, let's do this. He just got rid of the youth um, branch of the club. So, or what is it called? Let me see. So he just closed the youth academy, and instead he relied on Team B. He experienced everything first on a sports club from Denmark, and then implemented those work, and those didn't work. And blah blah blah. So now this club made it to the Premier League, like the world's one of the best, or like one of. So I think Premier League is the one that has the highest earnings among all football leagues. Oh yeah, we call it football, not soccer. Football leagues around the world. And now the team made to the Premier League, and if they get relegated after 1 year, they will make $300 million. If they can stay up for a second year, they'll make 400 plus million. So awesome, no? So okay, installation finished. So there's a flash flood warning here. I have to check how it's outside. La, 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 Okay, let's see what Ken says.
So let's pop this open. So the main tools, if you use Python as a data scientist, are going to be Spider. So this is the IDE that I usually use. You might also use Jupyter Notebooks, and then Jupyter Lab is a expansion on Jupyter Notebooks that gives you some of the features that you might see in Spider. So I think Spider is probably the most similar to a normal IDE where you're writing Python scripts and running them. Jupyter is kind of on the other end where it's completely interactive and you're running just basically blocks of code. And then Jupyter Lab is a little bit of a hybrid. Again, I personally use Spider, but some might consider that a little bit old school. So if you want to be on the cutting edge, I would make sure you know how to use at least all three of these tools. And again, if you're doing projects, I would generally recommend that you do them and show them to other people through a Jupyter notebook. That's kind of what is done on Kaggle.com. That's what I see in a lot of GitHub repos. But all three of these tools are generally pretty good. If you're using R, RStudio is pretty much your best option. I would, that's the only thing that I've personally used in R, and I've had a good experience with it. It is, in my opinion, almost identical to Spider and Python. So if you are using R and you want to try and transition over to learning some Python, that Spider IDE might be a comfortable fit for you. If you're doing actual development, if you're putting something into production, you're putting something up, I personally like VS Code a lot. It works very well for me. And that Spider IDE might be a comfortable fit for you. If you're doing actual development, if you're putting something into production, you're putting something up, I personally like VS Code a lot. It works very well for me. And it's a pretty simple interface as well. So generally when I'm trying to access Anaconda or run any of these things, I actually do it through the Anaconda Prompt. So you can go Anaconda Prompt and that will pop up. This is in a Mac, it's the same as the terminal, same as in Linux, but you have to open this prompt. So let's say I wanted to open Spider. I would do Spider just like that, and it will eventually open up here for me. Same things with Jupyter, Jupyter Lab, the VS Code. All of these things will be run through here. Now, if you want to install a new package, let's say you wanted to install pandas, for example. Now, if you want to install a new package, let's say you wanted to install pandas, for example, what you can do is, let's exit here.
Do you want to become a data scientist? If yes, then start to learn.
So we can do conda install pandas, and it'll load right through here. I would assume I already have the package installed, but if not, this is a good approach to doing it here. So we can proceed, yes, and this will update pandas here. So I also said earlier in the video that I would show you how to create an instance where you were using a different version of Python. So in order to do this, we do conda create name, and we're going to call this py2, and then we're going to do Python equals 2.7. So this will install Python 2.7 as an instance, and so we can activate that instance and run that through here. So rather than, Python 3 is great, but it can't run basically every package. So it actually tells us what to do here. So we can do is conda activate py2, and that gives us this instance of Python version 2.7. We'll do the same thing again. Spider here. Oops. Okay, so it turns out I actually have to install Spider on this environment. So we do conda install Spider. And so it'll collect these packages. We'd have to do the same thing for all of these other packages here. This one might take just a little bit. And so if you have these different environments, what you can do is install different things on them. So for example, I have a TensorFlow environment that I use where I have everything installed. If you want to preserve this, you can create an environment and always use that, or you can share it as like a Docker image or something like that. So it took a little bit, but I just had to open this again. So we can do activate py2. It opens this. As you can see, we're using this py2 instance, and we type Spider. I'm still getting some kind of weird error messages and stuff like that, but this is working. So as we can see here, let me move this into the frame. We're using Python 2.7.16, and that's exactly what we want. If we exit this and We'll just start a new one. And we just do over here. It'll open up with Python 3.7 or whatever I use.
Okay. So we said close this. Folder install panels. All requested packages are already installed. Okay. Anaconda update. Collecting package metadata. So environment. Yes. Yes. Downloading and extracting packages. Okay, now Conda install by the equals 5.0.0. Still waiting.
So as we can see here, this is Python 3.7.4. So that is how you, again, create one of these new instances. It works with all of these different ones as well. So that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully it helps you get familiar with the tools that are used in data science, either if you use Python or if you use R. I know that it took me a little while to figure out how to install all this stuff and get used to using it. So hopefully this cuts through some of that noise and allows you to understand what's really important and how to configure these things. Thank you so much for watching and good luck on your data science journey.
Okay, I did that. I did all of this.
If you watch my
Let's look at this.
Your code is nice and organized. So why did I create this video? Well, this slide I think shows a little reason why, and nothing against this slide. I think that this definitely is useful in certain ways and has a place, but this is pretty overwhelming, right? And if you're getting into data science for the first time, or if you've only been in data science for a little bit, this might be kind of what it feels like when you think about how do I set up my coding environment? Like, should I use Python or another language? What code editor should I use out of the hundreds that are out there? Not actually hundreds, but what kind of virtual environment should I use? Should I use one of these other online platforms? Like, how do I do all this stuff? And so this can be incredibly overwhelming, which is why I think that wrapping it into kind of this nice package here, just a few things that really get you up and running to a professional level pretty quickly, can save you a ton of time. And this is the environment that I use on a daily basis. I mean, this is what professionals use, So it's not like this is going to be too simplistic. This is going to set you off with a really great foundation on top of which you can get into the actual data science faster. So that's why I created this. That's why I think you're going to learn a ton from it and find it really valuable. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so first up is the terminal. And we're not going to spend a ton of time on this because this can get a little tricky between different operating systems. And the default terminal that comes on your computer is probably good enough for you to go ahead and get started with. But I will go ahead and show you what I like to use. And if you're on a Mac or a Linux, then this is going to be my recommended path here. And if you're not, then hang on just a second. If you're on a Windows, I'll talk about that in just and get started. All right, so first up is the terminal. And we're not going to spend a ton of time on this because this can get a little tricky between different operating systems. And the default terminal that comes on your computer is probably good enough for you to go ahead and get started with. But I will go ahead and show you what I like to use. And if you're on a Mac or a Linux, then this is going to be my recommended path here. And if you're not, then hang on just a second. If you're on a Windows, I'll talk about that in just a second. So if you're on a Mac or Linux, Zish is a really great shell, and Oh My Zish here is a nice way to install it. So this just comes with a little bit more power than your normal shell might, like Bash. I would recommend giving this a try. But if you want to stick with the default terminal on your computer, so if you go down here and you see terminal here, this pops up. So here you go. You see actually, oh, my Zish is installed. It's the default terminal, and mine wants to update right now. So I'm going to go ahead and let it update. But your default terminal might be running bash, and that is probably fine as well. So you see here, my terminal gives me just a little bit of nice color schemes, and I've got my Conda environment over here on the left. And if I'm in a Git repository for version control, it shows that as well. And there's some other handy dandy little tricks that you can use with Zish. So I would recommend installing that. Now, if you are on a Windows, I want to talk about that really quickly. So you're probably fine sticking with the Windows command prompt or PowerShell. So CMD is going to be your basic command prompt, your basic terminal on a Windows computer. And this actually works a little bit better out of the box with the virtual environment that I'm going to show you later. But you can also use PowerShell, and this is going to be and I admittedly don't know a ton about the difference between these two, but I believe PowerShell comes with more advanced configurable programming and scripting and things like that compared with the normal command prompt. But like I said, this doesn't work quite as well with a couple of features about the virtual environment here. So both of these should already be installed on your computer, I believe, if you have a Windows. So I think that these should be a good starting place for you. Try starting out with the command prompt, see if that works. I'm going to mention two other things really quickly for Windows users. One of them is very new as of the time of recording this video. That's the Windows terminal, or the Microsoft terminal. So I believe that this is supposed to bring together the kind of the command prompt, PowerShell, and also Linux/Unix style terminal functionality, all within kind of one terminal here. So this is pretty new, and I haven't used it, but this could be something worth checking out because honestly, a lot of developers use the Linux style terminal, which is Bash or Zish, and it's going to be kind of hard to find programming support for Windows command line and PowerShell some of the time. This is just due to, you know, maybe the fact that a lot of the world's servers and websites and everything are run on Linux machines, and a lot of developers use Linux and Mac, and Macs are built on top of kind of the Linux shell. They have, you know, Bash, and they can install Zish and everything. So it's just going to be a little bit harder to find support for Microsoft stuff, which is why something like the Windows terminal might help. And that leads me to the last thing, which I'm going to recommend here, which is the Linux subsystem for Windows. This is a way to essentially install Linux on your Windows machine and then have access to the normal Bash and Zish style terminal. So if you're on Windows, I'm sorry that I don't have quite as clear of a recommendation here, but you know, start with the command prompt. And if you want to dig a little bit deeper, I would recommend checking out the terminal, the Microsoft terminal, and the Linux subsystem for Windows. But either way, let's go back over here to our terminal. I'm going to type clear, and I'm going to cd. So I'm in my home directory right now. I'm going to cd into a project data science directory that I already have created. I'm going to type ls to list the contents of this directory. And I'm going to make a new project directory here just for this video so that we can walk through a few things. So I'm going to make a new directory. Let's call it data science environment. All right, so now if I do an ls, you'll see that we have this new data science environment folder here. I'm going to cd change directories into that data science environment. And if I do another ls, you'll see that there's nothing in here currently. All right, and that wraps up the quick little terminal piece of setting up your data science environment. And by the way, we'll be using the terminal a little bit more throughout this video. So if you've never used it before, you'll get a sense for some of the things that we do with the terminal, but you've already seen, you know, a little bit of it. You can list out your directories and your files. You can make new directories. This is where you can launch Python and get into an interactive shell. This is where you'll run Jupyter notebooks from, etc. So there's, you know, we'll talk more about things that you do with the terminal as we go through this video. So next up, let's get Python installed, and let's also talk about virtual environments. And we're going to kind of do these at the same time, because the way that I recommend installing Python and your virtual environment manager is through this thing called Miniconda. So Miniconda is essentially a smaller version of the Anaconda distribution. And the Anaconda distribution is a pretty popular way to install Python and a lot of key data science libraries that you use in Python, like NumPy and Pandas, etc. So Anaconda is pretty big because it includes kind of everything, all of the different scientific libraries that basically anyone might want to use. So Miniconda is a lot smaller, but it includes the key things still that we want. It includes Python, and it includes Conda here, which is the way that we install new packages and the way that we manage in Python. Install Python and a lot, and kind of do these at the same time because, you know, as we go through this video, etc. So there's, you know, we'll talk more about things that you do with the terminal as we go through this video. So next up, let's get Python installed, and let's also talk about virtual environments. And we're going to kind of do these at the same time because the way that I recommend installing Python and your virtual environment manager is through this thing called Miniconda. So Miniconda is essentially a smaller version of the Anaconda distribution. And the Anaconda distribution is a pretty popular way to install Python and a lot of key data science libraries that you use in Python, like NumPy and pandas, etc. So Anaconda is pretty big because it includes kind of everything, all of the different scientific libraries that basically anyone might want to use. So Miniconda is a lot smaller, but it includes the key things still that we want. It includes Python and it includes Conda here, which is the way that we install new packages and the way that we manage our virtual environments. So I would recommend go ahead and, depending on your system, download and install Miniconda for your computer, and make sure to do Python 3.7. That's the way, or pretty much everything has migrated to Python 3.7 these days, unless you're at a company that is still using Python 2, for some reason. Then that's pretty much the only reason you want to use Python 2 is if your company is currently using it. But otherwise, download Miniconda for Python 3. And I'm going to exit out and start a new one, just because you might also have to do this to refresh your terminal after installing Miniconda. Let's go back into our folder here that we were in. And you should now have access to Python, and you can test that just by running Python and seeing if it works. And you should see Python 3.7 or Python 3.8 or something like that. And also if you type which Python, so I have Anaconda installed here, you'll probably see Miniconda bin Python or something like that. And the which command here just tells you essentially, if I run the command Python right now, what is it actually going to run? Where is the executable? Where is the application that is going to get run when I run Python? And in my case, currently, Python, if I run that, it will run this, Anaconda 3, bin Python. And this is an important note because of what we're about to do, which is use Conda to create a virtual environment. So let's pop over here to Google really quickly. I'm going to Google, let's try Google virtual environment Python. Want to find a quick, so, all right, so this image is kind of small. All right, yeah, this image is kind of small, but it demonstrates what a virtual environment is good for. So let's say that you download Miniconda and you install it, and you have a version of Python installed now. And let's say that you install some packages using Miniconda into your main Python installation. So you install NumPy and you install pandas and you install a bunch of other stuff from the dark corners of the internet that you found that you think is going to be helpful for your data science project, or whatever it is that you're doing. And now let's actually go back to the example from before, that you go to a company and that company has some of their code in Python 2.7. Well, now what do? Do you uninstall Python on your system and reinstall Python 2.7? Well, that's going to break everything that you've been writing in your newer version of Python. So how do you solve this problem here? Or let's say you've got two different packages like pandas. Maybe you want to install two different versions of pandas. You want to install like the really new version with some cool experimental features, but breaking. How do you get around that without having, that's where virtual environments come in handy. So a virtual environment is essentially just like this image shows, two different versions of Python installed in you can install different versions of Python packages. So this is definitely a best practice, and I'm going to show you how to do that the easiest way right now. So Conda, which you just installed with Miniconda, is the package installation and virtual environment manager. So if we wanted to install a new package like pandas, we could do Conda install pandas. We could do Conda install NumPy or whatever. And if we want to create a new virtual environment, we also do that with Conda. So the format for that is Conda create. So you're creating a new virtual environment. You do -in, and then we're going to give it a name here. So we'll say data science env. So env for environment. So you give it a name, and then whenever you're creating it, you can go ahead and pass it whatever you want to install. So let's install Jupyter to start out with. We'll install pandas to start out with, and maybe we'll go ahead and install matplotlib and Seaborn, which is another data visualization library that I like. So I'm going to hit enter here. And now Conda is going to figure out what it takes to install these packages that I've just requested. And it's going to and install a whole new version of Python into a different directory along with these packages. All right, so this says solving environment. It's going to ask us, do we want to proceed with installing these packages? And you might be wondering, hey, why are we installing like 1 million packages here? I just asked for 4 packages. So that's because these 4 packages each rely on other packages. So let's take a look here. So Panda, matplotlib might rely on pyqt location. This is going to create a new virtual environment under the envs folder, the envs direct. Go ahead and hit yet, and then we'll be back. If you're using Windows, there's a little bit of difference between PowerShell and CMD, the command prompt. So I have had more luck in the past when I've had to do this with the command prompt, but play around with it, do a little bit of Googling to see which one works best for you, or try the whole Windows Microsoft Terminal.
Okay, I'll skip this part quickly because I think when you do Anaconda, you might not need, I mean, I think you still might need virtual environments, but for example, right now, I installed what Ken Jee showed. I had downloaded Anaconda, I installed Python 3.9, etc. I downloaded Anaconda, it comes with Python 3.8. I updated Spider 5.0, and now what I did was I imported pandas as PD, and then I created a data frame, 2x2 data frame. That's it. I just did that and it worked fine. So it seems like now I can perform, I can arrange my data. Like what I'm going to do is I have different text files that has, let's look at what they have. So it has 3 columns and 1,000 lines each. So there will be like 3 columns. Wait. So 3 columns and 1,001 lines. So 3 columns, 1 data point has 3 columns and 1,001 rows. And what I will do, so I'll keep the heading. So excluding the heading, each data point has 3 columns and 1,000 rows. I will stack data points one below the other, and each data point will have if I do that, each data point will have 3 or the whole data set will have 3 columns and approximately 30,000 lines. What if I transpose? Wait. No, yeah. Okay. So we will do that. what we are going to do basically, we will append one data set below the other. Take, append, take, append, take, append. Yeah. And then we will start to create other features. And for each feature, we will add columns. So seems like we have Spider installed on this work computer. This is good. And results. What is love? Maybe don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more. So right now I'm downloading my data. Uh, Okay, guys, so I guess I'll go because Bahar is coming to pick me up. But what I'm gonna do, I will finish the pandas exercises, and then I'll start to put my data sets together. And to do that, of course, I have to do some extra work outside the pandas exercises, because, like, for example, my data sets are txt, not .csv. So maybe, I don't know, it's probably easy for pandas to read CS for txt files, but I might have to convert them. So I'll look into those type of stuff, but maybe I work more today at night, or maybe I just stop. I don't know. Maybe more tomorrow. Anyways, see you later.